We have this one. Hello, everyone. I think I speak for all of us when I say we really kind of hate Mary Sweeney for making us cry like that on a Sunday. That's what we really needed. I mean, I started with the Sissy Spacek, Richard Farnsworth scene when they were laying under the stars. And, I mean, I'm too depressed to do the Q&A. I'll have some announcements later, but let's bring her up because I have too many questions. Mary Sweeney, come on. Oh my gosh, that it is so beautiful. But when the movie started, I heard you really comment on the 35mm print. So let's start there. Why is it so different here than it is at home?
Because it's film. It's a print, and it's not digital. And I recently saw this in a remastered 4K DCP, and it looked great, except I didn't feel the same way from the very beginning. As soon as this came up, I haven't seen it in 35mm in a long time.
I mean, it was so beautiful. Tell me something about Freddie Francis. I mean, that shot that I said with them laying under the stars, it was beautiful. How did they shoot that? Do you remember how they got that light, or can you tell us something about his work?
Okay, well, Freddie Francis is very famous. He shot Elephant Man, and that was nominated for an Academy Award, but it didn't win. And he did win the Academy Award for Glory. And he is a very venerable British cinematographer, and he also shot Dune. And because, you know, everybody knows how difficult Dune was for David, and how it was just a kind of a tough thing. So this was the first time that they worked together since Dune. And Freddie was 81. You know, Richard Farnsworth was 78, I think, something like that. And oh my God, Richard Farnsworth's face, I forgot how beautiful it is in the 35mm. It's unbelievable. So anyhow, and this was both of them, this was their last film. So Freddie he's a really great DP. And he's been around, he's made a lot of stuff. And he also made a lot of directed Hammer horror movies in the 60s, I guess, 70s.
Your writing in this is exactly what I like. It's what I'm looking for in films. It's why I don't like new films. Nobody explains anything. Nobody comes in and says, oh, I lost my 7 kids or whatever. Like, they don't tell you that. You have to earn everything that you learn. Tell me about writing this script and how you did that. Was that important to you to have it be subtext, not exposition?
Oh, absolutely. It's this is a very emotional film, and it's a film that in the hands of another director could be sentimental and sappy very quickly. And it was written to be very emotional and not sentimental and very spare. But it's also, it's to celebrate the Midwestern culture, the kind of laconic, characters with, stubborn pride and so much dignity that I grew up around. My dad was raised on a dairy farm, so I had uncles who were pig farmers and dairy farmers, but I didn't grow up on a farm. And it was really important to sort of honor that kind of nonverbal kind of strength and wisdom, and also to send a message of reconciliation. And so it was very spare in the script, and I just can't say enough about Richard Farnsworth's face, and no hair and makeup ever in the movie, and just like after the conversation in the bar, the war stories exchanged, and then there's a nice push on him sitting alone, and it's just his face. you don't need any words, and its face is incredible.
And also the final scene, were there executives? I don't know if this movie had to go through executives, but did someone say, well, you need the brothers to say what they fought about? Well, where's all the lines? I mean, did somebody push you for
A
that?
number of people, not David, most importantly, a number, including, honestly, John, my writing partner, was just like, we're just going to not say anything. Because that's cinema. That's cinema. The power of cinema is the less you say, the more you make people feel, the more powerful the film is. And, it gets very spare. I mean, there's a lot of just sort of writing, and it's a very slow-mo kind of road movie. And, it really brings your heart rate down, I think, over the course of the film. It just, gets you in a different... The guy, right at the end, the guy in the bar, he's just such a character. And it's just like, he's going over there, he's going to wipe the bar and pour the coffee. But you come back to Richard's face, and you can read, if he's still there, and the kind of, is he still there?
The other thing about this movie is Angelo's score. I love it so much. Can you tell us anything about how David and Angelo worked on it? Did you have any input on it? Did you tell me something about the score?
That was, everything about this film was so special for me. And usually David and Angelo would do the music, and they often went to Prague to work with orchestra. And I was never there. But by that time, what was the, Fred Madison's house in Lost Highway had become our own mixing 5.1 recording studio and mixing stage, so we could control the length of the mix and do it at home. And so they did it with these incredible studio musicians in Los Angeles, so talented, these people. And they came into the studio. It was probably about, I would say maybe a dozen, 10 people, and Angelo, and had the guy who was playing guitar solos was in an ISO booth, and the rest of them were sort of arranged in the front. And I just felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. To just sit in there and listen to this music, being played. It was incredible. But it's Angelo, his versatility. At the same time, it's very kind of country. That Italian kind of melancholy of Angelo's music is, just shot through it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's so different from Lost Highway, which is before this, and of course Twin Peaks, and it does show all that he can do. And the other day when we were talking, I mentioned to you how much I think this should come out on vinyl, and how many people here would buy a vinyl?
I see. Fortunately, it's not Disney that financed the film, so we would be negotiating on that with the French financiers. So I'll mention it to a person in France.
Yeah, let's get this done.
The French connection.
I mean, I want this to happen so much because, again, I love the music and it's important for Angelo's side. Did David add the twin having the sore on his? It seems very. It seems.
I'll tell you another thing he added is the landscape around the deer lady hitting the deer. That it was completely barren. The line was always in there. Where do they come from? But then he just picked that landscape.
What about Sissy Spacek's stutter?
In writing the script, just to go back to that, John Roach is a childhood friend of mine. I think a lot of people in Chicago know him from the sports show that he used to have, on a radio show, I think. And we took a trip that I did a lot of research, and because obviously it's based on a real story, and so I did a lot of research as much as I could find out about what his route was, where the locations were. We actually shot in Alvin's house in Lorenz, Iowa.
That opening shot is really his house?
The house that they're in is
Right,
Alvin's
the
house, and the opening shot is Lorenz. It had the big water tower, so it was Lorenz on it.
Right.
We didn't just paint that; it was there. And so we went out, and in April, I went out to Wisconsin, and John and I drove the route, and we met his I think we met all 7 of his remaining children, and that Rose did have, so that is Rose's speech impediment. So she had some sort of, all of the children were born at home, and as he says in the movie, only 7 of the 14 survived. So I'm sure there was like some kind of oxygen at birth thing, but she was smart. It was just she had that speech impediment. So Sissy spent time with her, and she did a really great job.
Yeah, she was incredible in this film. She obviously is one of David's lifelong friends. She helped on Eraserhead buying film. That's what Charlotte Stewart told us at the beginning of this. How did she get cast? Because she must have wanted to be in everything David had done through times. And
I just think that, their careers kind of came up at the same time. She was pretty busy, and but also she's married to Jack Fisk, who is the production designer on The Straight Story, and also Mulholland Drive. Very famous, Terrence Malick's production designer. So Jack and Sissy were both on the shoot, which is nice. It was really kind of a family thing, and I think he just thought of, I don't know when he thought of her. And it was a reunion also with Freddie, so it's just somehow it was that kind of movie. It was a real family affair.
Yeah, and it comes out that way. When I was watching this, I was thinking in the beginning minutes, boy, I'm gonna say something that's maybe I shouldn't say. But by the end of it, I'm like, no, I'm saying it. This is David's best directed film. I believe it wholeheartedly. Every scene is set up perfectly. It's so thoughtful. As a director, just plain capturing something. I think this is his best work, and I was wondering, do you think he was freed to spend more time on camera because he didn't write it, and he wasn't worried about, is this working? So maybe, I'm sure you don't want to say what's best work, but can you speak about the difference of David doing something he didn't write?
Yes, first of all, let me say that, every movie he makes is his best work. I mean, they're so different. Elephant Man and Eraserhead and The Straight Story and Mulholland Drive, they're all different and they're all masterful. So,
I totally agree, but this is the best.
It's different. It's very different. And as David's producer, I was always looking for things that brought out the side of David we all saw in Elephant Man, a very kind of lyrical and very poetic. And not so much of, very many dark things at the same time. And there were dark things in this too, but they were very very sort of much more just human versions of, like regular people's kind of, dark moments. And what's really beautiful is just the kind of courage that he had to take this trip. And it is the only film he's made that he didn't write the script. And I don't think it was so much the writing. He once made some comment about it was a really, really, he thinks it's the most abstract film he's ever made. But when you make something this slow, it's really hard. It's really hard to have this kind of very slow paced with today's audiences and to keep them in the movie. And so every part of it was very hard to do. And I think that, I think he really rose to something that he was out of the habit of doing. It wasn't like anything else he'd made. And I think that sort of challenged him, and obviously he did a pretty good job.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. So were you like wandering around with the script, being like, I don't know who's gonna direct this, maybe I'll call Scorsese, I don't know. I mean, how did that ever work out that you got him to direct it?
Well, I was working on this. I was trying to think of the timeline of when he was writing, because I mentioned this last night or a couple nights ago at Mulholland Drive that I locked picture on The Straight Story and turned it over to sound, and like the next month or a couple weeks later we started shooting Mulholland Drive. So I think he must have been writing Mulholland Drive in '98, earlier in '98. So we made this trip in the spring, in April of '98. Then John came out to LA for 1 week, and we wrote a very short, very bad first draft, like 45 pages. And then we just kind of, long distance, we did it back and forth. We'd each read it, and then we'd go through it and have notes, and then reassign scenes and that kind of thing. And then in June, we were done. And all this time, I live with David, right? So all this time, you know, I'm telling him about my project, and he's saying, that's really great, that sounds great, it's not my cup of tea. And I wasn't indicating to him that I expected him to make it, and I knew there were things about it that were similar, like folksy kind of Twin Peaks things. But anyhow, he just kept telling me, you know, good for you, no die, you know. So, and then I gave him the script, and he fell in love with the script. It was that simple, and he fell in love with the emotions of the script. And anybody who was crying should know that sitting behind me in the cutting room, he would be crying. And I, you know, like the brothers are brothers scene, the war scene, and the Richard sitting in the dark after the war scene, it was really moved him.
Well, it moves all of us. Now, it's not so weird for Disney to have their name over everything because we live in a world where there are 3 companies and they own everything. You know, they probably own this mic. But in 1999, there were choices. You know, not everything was Disney. How did this become a Disney movie?
Well, as I said, they had a distribution for the U.S. and I think Scandinavia. So they didn't finance it. They were not part of our production. And I talked many times, and I'm sure people are aware that we had been financed by the French first, a company called CB 2000, and then Studio Canal. And so Lost Highway and Firewalk with Me were both CB 2000, and then that company folded. Nothing to do with our films. And then we did this with Studio Canal, also Mulholland Drive. So this was just a very interesting process, and having gone through it many times with David, as you know, critically renowned as his films were. They were small films, our budgets were small, and they didn't make a lot of money at the box office, and they were kind of challenging. So we couldn't really find anybody in the United States who would give him Final Cut. And as everyone knows, after Dune, he refused ever to make a film again without creative control. And the French were amazing. So we would, you know, have a script, we'd make a budget, we'd send the script in the budget to the French, they would sign off, approve the script, and approve the budget. They had nothing to say about casting. There were never any notes on the script. They totally respect creative rights of all artists. And they wouldn't come to the set. We kept cash flow, cost reports going, but they were never seeing dailies. They never saw any cuts. And we mixed the film, we cut the negative, and then we go to Cannes with it, and they would be very happy. So that's not how it works ever. And, so I, what was the question?
Was how Disney.
Okay, so Disney, yeah. So we went to Cannes, and there were a lot of people interested in distributing it. And there was a new leadership. Michael Eisner had left, and this guy, Peter Schneider, was taking over. And he really wanted to he just saw this as an opportunity to make live action films at Disney that were were G-rated, but were a little bit different. And he was also a big fan of David's. And so he just took a chance, he was the boss, so it wasn't, and it's Disney, but he wanted to do it, and he really courted us, and they were, of course, going to buy it for the most money, but it was competitive with the other people who wanted to buy it. And we just thought, well, everything else about this film is different, and I remember the day, I'd always been in the cutting room when we'd get the call from the MPAA, like Blue Velvet, the scene of Jeffrey's butt, you have to take 12 frames off of that, things like that. Who knows? It's like, it never was really too tough, and I got the call from the MPAA, and they said, okay, you have 2 choices. It's either PG or G. And we didn't have to change anything. I said, hold on a second, and I put David on the phone, and it was just really fun. So it was like everything about this film was, strangely, for David, the most experimental film he made in some ways. I think he said that. So, and then, so they just had a couple of territories, but the US was their territory.
I love it so much. The thing that sticks with me with this movie is kindness. And we're living in a time right now where we can pick a villain, a very big villain for us all to blame on us not being nice to each other. But it really comes down to us being nice to strangers, and that is so much of what this movie is about, is kindness. And I appreciate that. Like, thank you for bringing kindness out of us. We're there. I'm Midwestern as well, and I recognize, like, my family, my town. Can you tell us why kindness is so important to David's work? Because I think it's in The Return, I think it's in Elephant Man, I think it's here, and in many places. And yours as well, seeing how you wrote it.
David is, he is very kind. He's very kind on set. He's a gentleman, he's very courtly. He has, incredibly kind parents, comes from a really good family. And so I think it surprises people when they meet him sometimes, because he's not dangerous seeming at all. And his work is really dark and dangerous, and that's important to all of us. But there also is emotion, in the films. And but for me, it was, a love letter to where I grew up in Wisconsin and the party state. Speaking from personal experience. But it was really important to me. I felt like, it wasn't like I was on any kind of, political mission, because we made this in 1999, and it's the internet. It's not any person. It's the internet that makes us, it's all the bullying, all the outing, all the canceling. That's what's broken down our ability to be human beings, treating each other like human beings. So that was kind of the beginning of that, but I heard the story. I read the story, and it just wouldn't leave me. It took me 4 years to get the rights, and it just never let go of me. And that's also why I decided to write it, because by that time I didn't want anybody else to write it. It was so close to me. And I think it was just that kind of dignity and that stubborn pride and that, cantankerous curmudgeon thing. I really loved that character.
Well, we are all thankful for your kindness that you've given us over the last couple of days, and for giving us this movie, which you heard here. She said it's David's best work. And
I did not say that.
Mary will be back to introduce Lost Highway. Thank you for this.
Stick around.
Yeah, thank you so much.